When I was a 5-year-old boy, I used to dream to grow up to become a terrorist. Now, I know this sounds absolutely crazy, but please bear with me here now. I promise you this comes from a place of love and compassion and not a place of evil or cruelty. When I was a 5-year-old boy, my best friend was my grandmother. She was a loving and compassionate woman. And she was telling me stories of her siblings being lined up in front of the house here with her mother, being forced to watch their father, my great-grandfather, dig his own grave at gunpoint of English soldiers. This is something that English soldiers had been doing in Ireland for hundreds of years at this point, torturing and tormenting our people. So, hearing these stories, I used to dream as a 5-year-old boy at night time of growing up and getting a boat and taking it over to England and landing on a quiet English beach at the dead of night. And I would dream of going to the first house that I'd come across and killing everybody in it. And then I'd eat their food and sleep in their bed during the day. And when the darkness night came again, I'd go across the fields to the next house and kill them all. Now, I know this sounds crazy and a lot of people hearing this might be angry. But whom you be angry with depends on your perspective. The least angry people would be Irish people because we're aware of all these stories. In fact, some people would think I'm foolish to still be talking about these stories. And I would like to say now that Irish people have made full peace with the English people. I've many friends in England. My sister has now spent the majority of her life in England. My niece is English, as well as her father. And these are all people that I love. But the people who might listen to this video that might be the most angry would be English people, because they'd be hearing these stories for the first time, many of them, and they'd be hearing these stories with an incorrect context of history. They'd be hearing these stories with an incorrect perspective, because the Crown would have hidden the true history from them. And if anybody would like to argue that point with me, you don't need to argue with me at all. We all have access to ChatGPT now, or Gemini, or a host of other large language models. There is no excuse anymore for ignorance. But the reason I'm telling these stories is to give you perspective. I'd like you to think of yourself as a young boy or girl, listening to stories from your grandmother or grandfather telling you these stories. Or better again, imagine yourself as a young boy or girl lined up with your brothers and sisters in front of this house, watching your father being tormented or tortured. Or if you're someone that's seriously lacking any compassion at all, you might have to think of yourself being the one that's tortured or tormented. And the reason I'm telling these stories is because once again the world is at war, and the people who wage this war, the people who live in the country who wage this war, are once again completely lacking perspective. And this is not helped at all by their president, who is continuing to reinforce a false narrative to them. A lot of the American people think that the Iranian people are mad to make a deal here. Well, it wasn't a deal that I used to dream about when I went to bed as a 5-year-old boy. It was revenge. I can absolutely guarantee you that many Iranian people, as well as the IRGC, are absolutely looking for revenge now. This war has now fully turned into economic warfare. In fact, it's been economic warfare from the very start, because in war, there's no holds barred. You'll do whatever you can to survive and win, especially if you're the side that's being attacked. If you were fighting for survival, would you stop fighting? The answer is absolutely no. In fact, the only people who are likely to stop fighting, who might want to stop fighting, are the people who are waging this war. And we see many reports in the news now that there are many US soldiers who'd rather throw themselves off the side of a ship than continuing to fight this war. But Trump now in recent times has also been admitting now that this is economic warfare, because it is clear to everybody that there is no military resolution to this war anymore. The Americans cannot force the Iranians to open up the Strait of Hormuz using military forces. And just like the Iranians outlasted the US in military warfare, they're going to outlast the US in this economic warfare as well. Because I can absolutely guarantee you that the IRGC will do whatever they can to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. And by doing this, I think they're going to create the biggest energy and oil crisis that our world has ever seen. And this is absolutely guaranteed to drive inflation up, which is guaranteed to drive US Treasury Yields up. And for any of you who are in touch with the financial news over the last week, it is now becoming clear that if US Treasury Yields go much higher, this could easily be the cause of the next financial crisis in the US and therefore our global economy. So I wanted to make this video to give you some perspective so you can see the actual reality more clearly. Because if you think that the Iranians and Americans are going to come to a deal anytime soon, you're still living in fantasyland. So in my next video, I want to talk more about why my great-grandfather had to dig his grave, and had to do with guerrilla warfare. Because the Irish Army was a much inferior army to the British Army at that time, we had to use guerrilla warfare in order to win, which we did. And the IRGC are now going to use guerrilla warfare and asymmetrical warfare and economic warfare against the US in order to beat them. So if you'd like to know more about guerrilla warfare, if you'd like to understand how the Irish defeated the English and how I believe the Iranians are now going to defeat the US, and if you'd like to know more about the Kilmichael ambush, which is the reason in that particular time why my grandfather had to dig his own grave, tune in to my next video.